So it's a wonderful film. And it's interesting
Thank
because
you.
there's been so many Beatles movies in the last like 10, 15 years, and yet we still don't know everything about John and Yoko. Like there's still new revelations, which is amazing. Was that kind of like the motivation for taking this on when you heard about this concert, or?
Well, to be totally honest, I didn't want to do it when I was first told about it because I thought there have been so many films about the Beatles, about John and Yoko. But um, it was an opportunity, first of all, I thought, to make a different kind of a music documentary, and when it's not often you get the opportunity where somebody will give you the money to make effectively a kind of what I would describe as an entertaining experimental film.
Hmm.
And and uh so just to play with the form, but play with the form of documentary was really interesting to make something that appears to be non-narrative, but sort of has a narrative to play with kind of, not having any talking heads, authorial voice in that way was just really interesting. And then John, the real reason I did it is because I loved John Lennon when I was 13 years old. And and he died then, and that was had a huge emotional impact on me. And I think people of my generation, a lot of people would have that same feeling. And then I listened to everything, watched everything with him in it for a few years, and then it kind of fell away. It became my sort of teenage thing. But the idea of revisiting that through this concert, which is incredibly, the only full-length concert that he ever did after the Beatles, I thought that's a once in a lifetime opportunity. And so yeah, this combination of those two things, this amazing concert and which has been restored and was previously only released on VHS, I think in 1986, or a version of it. But it's a totally different thing now with with the restored and remixed sound.
Now, had the Bowie doc Moon Age Daydream, did that come out while you were working on this, or but was that kind of
That had come out before, and that was definitely an
okay?
inspiration for this. I think that um, I wanted to make a film a bit like that, but with more emotion and more narrative. And I think in a way to sort of have I wanted to make a film that was like that, that had the sense of kind of like being a immersive collage, but actually also had a more you know more narrative that you could hang on to going through it. Because I found that a little frustrating with the Bowie film, that
Yeah.
there wasn't it felt like sometimes it was editing for editing's sake.
But I mean, the fact that it came out and it did well was probably made it more helpful
Absolutely,
for you.
absolutely.
Yeah.
It did very well. I really admired that film. I really admired it, and I thought it did something very new with the form.
And of course, Yoko is still alive and she's in her 90s now, but she's still around. She's still even doing
Yeah.
music and very active. I mean, did you want to sit down and talk to her at all during this whole process to find anything that you need to kind of
No,
or
no, because I kind of like the funny thing was with this film is that it was a film based on the archive. So it was kind of like whatever is in the archive is what I used to sort of create this story. And in a funny way, knowing too much or asking too many things was going to get in the way, because then I would have been going, oh damn, I don't have any archive to show that or whatever. So um, I think it's a kind of going at documentary from a slightly different perspective. Normally we're going at it with like, oh, I've got this story, I want to tell it as a documentary, but this is more like, what does the archive want to say?
and what kind of shape was the MSG show in as far as were there actual like full reels? Like was there actually edited all together or was it separate reels and cameras and all that stuff?
Well,
Or
originally the concert was filmed as part of the fundraising, and because they sold the rights to ABC and they did a TV special in 72, just a couple of months after the concert was on. And for that, they edited the negative of the film. So what we did is we'd gone back to the negative, but there was bits missing and some bits that we found that were in pause, that you could find in the original positive print that was made for the editing, or other bits were just missing. There'd be like 3 frames just gone, and you're like, oh God, what do I do with that? So, and also it has to be said that the material um was a little poorly filmed, I suppose you would say. There were 6 cameras a lot of the time, but sometimes one would just be looking at the ground for a whole reel. I think people were a little stoned, maybe that's my guess. Um, and actually the uh the audio was particularly poorly recorded, which is why it was never properly released, because I think the family felt that it wasn't really representative of what John would have wanted, and it was only now with the advent of incredible, new audio technology in the last few years, where you can really isolate what you want, and you can get a very muddy track, and you can isolate something, and you can pull it out from all the noise, and then once you've done that to every track, you can remix it and make something that sounds beautiful like this. And I think and that was a process, by the way, that Sean Lennon oversaw himself, and that took a couple of years to do, and that was really the impulse to how do we make a film to do justice to this incredible concert.
I also want to ask about your collaborator, Samrice
Yeah,
Edwards, who edited and co-directed, and who you
yeah,
worked with before on a few other docs as well.
yeah, yeah.
Um, so what kind of gave him this kind of promotion, and kind of like, is it like two heads better than one? He could do more. He could do press for
uh,
you when you're busy doing other things.
yeah, no, he has done
I
some
know.
press with but really, because this is a film which is all about editing. It's a bunch of material, a lot of news clips, and a lot of audio recordings, them on the telephone, and all these things that we found, home movies. There was so much of it, and so it's really all about, how do you shape that? And of course, that takes a great editor, and he's a really great editor. And in this film, I felt like it was like, well, I'm calling myself the director, and yes, it's my idea, and I'm sort of overseeing the overall thing. But really, so much of the power of this comes from the editing and from how well he's cut certain sequences, like the "Don't Worry, Kyoko" sequence, which is a masterpiece of editing, I think. And I thought, when I watched that sequence in particular, I just was like, how can I take credit for that? It felt so. I said to Sam, look, why don't you become a co-director? And that was actually very late on in the process, as we were finishing it. But I just had watched the film, and I thought, you know what? Yeah, I've directed it as much as you do with this film, but so much of what makes this good is him. So I wanted to acknowledge that.
That's great. And I think editors on documentaries, especially, they end up doing so much. They involve, the
They
writers,
really
the
do. They
producers,
really, really,
everything.
yeah, they really do. And that's your big collaborator. And I think, you know, the reason why director obviously is the top of the tree in the filmmaking business, and therefore to acknowledge that somebody has done more than just be an editor, just putting bits together under your instruction, that they've been creatively really involved. It felt like, I remember one of my top five documentaries of all time is Gimme Shelter, the Maysles Brothers film about the Rolling Stones and Altamont and all that, which is incredible. Um, and I felt like, and actually, funnily enough, thematically a little connected to this, because it's also sort of about the end of 60s idealism, isn't it? It's like the end of the Summer of Love and how it turns rotten. Um, but I felt on that film, Charlotte Zwerin was given a co-director credit, and she quite frequently was actually by the Maysles brothers, because I think for the same reason that I thought Sam should have one of this, is that actually, they have as big a creative contribution as the director does.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest revelations I took from the movie is it really reconciles that Yoko Ono was an amazing artist and musician in her own right. I think, a lot of people just kind of don't really give her the credit she deserves. And I think you see this movie and you realize that she had all this stuff going on with Kyoko. She had all this stuff going on with like people bashing her, because, with groupies and all that stuff, yeah. So I was curious about that. Like, was it hard to kind of like find that narrative within and still have the concept
No,
of
I really did very much want to, give Yoko her due, but I didn't set out to kind of go, this is a film where the whole purpose of this is to make Yoko look good. Very far from it. I mean, I really did follow what was in the material and what was interesting to me in the material. And um, I was so pleased that Sean Lennon, when he saw the film, said, "Oh, this is the film that represents who my mother was better than anything else I've ever seen." And I think because, yes, I'm sure she was an abrasive and strong-willed and outspoken person, but she was also incredibly talented, and she was John's equal, and he saw her as his equal.
hmm.
And I think, people seem to think that he was deluded, you know, but everyone knows that she basically wrote Imagine. She wrote the lyrics. They're basically the lyrics from her book Grapefruit, and he wrote the tune, all right, and probably massaged the words into being a song. But that as he himself acknowledged later in life, we should have shared a credit on that. Um, so the other thing is that as a documentary maker, approaching a subject which has been very well, you know, very well plowed already. You're trying to find, what are the things what are the uh, um, things that everyone accepts as true, the truisms about the Beatles. Well, one of them is, oh, Yoko is a difficult person and Yoko broke up the Beatles. And so you're automatically thinking, oh, well, is that really true? Let me have a look at this. And once you start to humanize Yoko and you start to understand things from her perspective as a mother who's just lost her child, because that's a big part of this film, is she's lost her child Kyoko. Her husband is effectively kidnapped. Her ex-husband has effectively kidnapped him, and John and Yoko actually come to New York in order to look for her. But they don't find her, and they don't find her for over 20 years.
Hmm.
Um, once you sort of start looking at that, you think, oh wow, that must have been difficult for her. And then you start hearing bits of audio at that time in their home movies where she's talking about how she felt everyone treated her as though she was stealing their monument. And she talks about how she was treated in England after the Beatles broke up and had people spat at her in the street and they called her a dirty Jap and they, generally were just really vicious and vile to her and racist towards her. And she says, I developed a stutter. I feel of myself to be a confident, attractive woman, but I developed this lack of confidence and this stutter in the way I spoke. And you start to think, oh God, oh, there's a whole different way of looking at this, which, from her point of view. And that just really interested me. It was just my perception that was the angle on the story that hasn't really been told.
Now, obviously, this took place after the movie ends. It was the affair he had with May Pang.
Yeah.
Even though she's kind of mentioned a little bit in the
You
movie,
yeah,
but
you hear her some of the because at the center of the film are all these phone calls that they
yeah.
recorded at the time. They're recording them because the FBI were tapping their phone, they believe, and so they wanted to have their own record of what they said. But you hear May Pang on the phone because she was their assistant or one of the assistants. Um, and I think, immediately after the period they're covered by this film, the film very much covers just like this 15, 16-month period from when they moved to New York in September, I think it is 71, until they move into the Dakota building, the
Mm.
famous Manhattan apartment they lived in I think May 73. So it's that period. And uh, immediately after this, John Yoko split. John goes off and has what's called the lost weekend, and he's
Mm.
becomes kind of alcoholic, and he's ends up really miserable, and comes back to New York and meets up with Yoko again. They get back together, and then they have a child. But in a way, what you see in this film is the reason that he had a sort of nervous breakdown, which is that they spent a year campaigning to stop Nixon being reelected
Mm.
and trying to be political, trying to change the world through politics, and then basically lost. Nixon had a landslide victory, the biggest in American history. The youth vote, even the people under 21, went to Nixon. So I think that there was a sense of what is the point? I thought we were trying to do something we thought we could really have an influence here, and we couldn't.
Right.
And so I think from that there was like a real disappointment and I'd say almost a breakdown.
Mm. But do you have any revelations yourself on how they got back together and stayed together until his death, or like how? Because it was just like I guess
I
it
don't,
was.
I don't I don't actually know, but I mean I think the thing is, that I obviously I read quite a few books about John, but I didn't sort of want to become, the Beatles nerd. I didn't want to make a film that was like only for, oh, these are these new things that I know. And I really didn't step outside the period that I was interested in because I thought, you know, what can be the way to make a new film about them is to really burrow into one little period where there happens to be so much archive where they were out in public all the time and on chat shows and so for this period, you can really do something interesting. And so I sort of didn't look beyond the boundaries of that. That was kind of, yeah, that way madness lies.
Well, I have to ask you a little kind of technical question, but I was curious because this is showing in IMAX this weekend. And
Yes.
what's involved with like stepping up all that footage and all the stuff from the 70s and kind of making it IMAX ready? Is it like what's
Well,
like the
yeah, it was an interesting because we didn't when we finished the film we made it for for to be projected in a normal theater, um, and then IMAX came to us and said, oh, we think this would be great in IMAX, and I was like, really? Oh my God, some of this is so soft, and they were totally right there because first of all, the 16 millimeter footage, when you go back to the negative, the 16 millimeter footage that is of the concert looks great. I mean, it has a lovely pastely softness on a big screen. And more than anything else, IMAX is about audio. It's one of those things everyone's like talks about the big screen, but actually it's being in that space, which is so spacious, so high, so whatever, and the detail of the sound you hear in the performance is incredible. There's a reason why, music films play in IMAX. It does sound so much better. Just the way that the theaters are equipped and the sort of shape and size of them. So yeah, it's paradoxical, but yeah, it really works in IMAX. And it, as it's if you sit in the IMAX and you listen to those songs, that is the closest you're ever going to get to the experience of seeing John Lennon live. I mean,
oh wow.
that's basically the truth of it. And he sounds amazing. And you would think I came out of making the film actually thinking, why the hell did he not do this more? He's so good at it. Good at it. You think of the Beatles as being this studio band who were just like fiddling around with recording things and putting things down on tape. And actually, no, they understandably because they played so much together prior to that sort of studio period, that and as you see with John, they are great on stage, and he's masterful on stage, and his sense of control of the crowd, control of the band is amazing.
Yeah, I did see the rooftop concert of Peter Jackson in IMAX, and
Yeah,
my,
yeah.
my biggest revelation for that is I got to see John Lennon's gold teeth in his back of his mouth on the big screen, which you would not see that anywhere else, really.
No,
Um,
no.
yes, we've spoken a lot over the years. We've spoken about narrative features, about docs, back and forth. You go
Yeah,
back and forth a lot. I mean,
yeah.
what's kind of your next move project's narrative? What's your motivation to kind of like not stay in one field and kind of like
Well, I mean, there's different levels of that, isn't there? There's on one level, it's like if you wait around for a narrative movie to get ready and to get the cast or the money and and the things come up and they come down, or whatever, you're going to be spending a lot of time frustrated, not making anything. So
mm,
my philosophy is, while I'm trying to get a narrative feature off the ground, um, I would like to make a documentary. It's a nice way to it's a nice way to keep working and to delve into things that you're interested in. Um, but also, I think because I started in documentaries and started making sort of feature documentaries in the late '90s, early 2000s, and it was part of that kind of boom in feature documentaries. Um, and that has sort of disappeared a bit. Documentaries aren't doing as well theatrically as they were, and hopefully this film will be bump the trend, but but I think that the other side of it is that I started in docs and feel very confident doing docs, and I love making them. I love the small team that you have, and you're just making it yourself and a DP and an editor, and it doesn't matter if you miss a day or two or you throw away the dailies of a few days. It doesn't matter. But when you're making a feature, it's all that pressure, all that money. You got to have everything exact. Every day is important. You can't mess up. You can't be in a bad mood. Whatever.
mm,
So I like the fact that it's less pressure. Um, but at the same time, when you make a feature film, there's nothing like the sort of sense of collaboration and group endeavor that you have with a great designer and a great DP, and I feel probably less confident making drama, and that's also why I like it because it's sort of like, well, I'm learning. You're learning all the time, and it's really stimulating. So I count myself really lucky to get to do both things. And I'm not saying I'm a master in either, but maybe I would be if I concentrated on one. But
yeah. Oh, last quick question. Have you seen September 5th? Did you see September
I
5th?
did. I did see September 5th. Yeah, and I met Tim Falheim, I think his name is, who's the director, and he very sweetly said, "Oh, I decided I wanted to make a film out of this story when I saw your documentary. I think he was like 18 in 1999 or 2000 when my documentary came out, made me feel old, and he saw that in Switzerland." And he said, I want to make a film about that. And it took him 20 something years and he made it. And I thought it was a beautiful piece of work. I think it had some of the best production design
Oh yeah,
I've seen
yeah,
in ages. Amazing, and beautiful cinematography, very
yeah.
meticulous reconstruction of the period, and yeah, a very smart way to tell that story. Because obviously people had tried to tell it before. Steven Spielberg did his Munich film,
Sure.
which was kind of partially about that, and I think it took such a big canvas that it was very, very hard to explain the history. Whereas I think in September 5 was, it honed in on the media aspect of it. Very, very clever.
Right. Listen, thanks a lot, Kevin. It's always great seeing you. And this is a wonderful film. I love the fact that, I mean, I wish we had a John Lennon today because I feel like he did a lot more that he realized back in the 70s.
Yeah,
So,
I think he did. I mean, I think that's the thing. I think one of the things we haven't talked about is that this movie is really, full of so much stuff that you look at it and you go, oh, that's today. That's like today.
exactly. Exactly.
It's really incredibly resonant. And it's like, oh my God, American history is on a loop of 52 years.